There are three phases to a game of chess: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. And in this section, I'd like to discuss the opening and what we should be aiming for. Of course, if you play well in the opening, that'll set you up for a successful game overall. So in this first video, I want to show you some excellent play by one side and some really terrible play by the other. And on the way, we'll look at some rules for the opening. Well, first of all, white plays pawn to e4. Excellent move. This is the most popular opening move, and with good reason. You can see it lets out that bishop into the game along this diagonal. So ready to move into the game. Let's get some paint off the board. And the pawn moves into the center and has influence over important squares. So we can say first of all that, well, we have our first two rules actually. We should be looking to control the center, but also we need to bring out our pieces. Now, black plays pawn to a5. Now that flouts our rule of trying to control the center. This is at the side of the board, and the side of the board simply isn't that important in the opening. So not a good move, I'm afraid that gets across. So white responds with pawn to d4, another excellent move. Well, you can see loads of paint on the board now, lots of activity. So let's just analyze this one. So these pawns in the middle of the board, beautiful. Control these central squares, excellent. But also it prepares to bring this bishop into the game somewhere along this diagonal. So excellent move. So again, control the center and bring pieces out. And black continues with his policy of advancing at the side of the board. Dreadful stuff, don't like it at all. And white brings out a knight. So remember our first two rules: control the center and bring our pieces, usually our knights and bishops, into the game. Moving the knight out here is excellent. It controls important central squares. And black responds with knight here. Not a good move. Well, it's good to bring out our pieces, but not at the side of the board. So not a great move. But even if black had wanted to bring that knight out here, for example, because black hasn't controlled the center, then white would be able to push on and attack the knight, and the knight would simply have to move away. So already by this stage, black is in some trouble. So anyway, the knight came out to a6, and white responded with bishop to c4. So again, bringing out our knights and bishops, that's one of our important opening rules, and it moves to an excellent square, striking across the board. And black responded by putting another knight out, and again to the side of the board, not great at all. And here, well, we introduce our third really important opening rule: get castled. Castling is really what you should be aiming for at a very early stage in the opening, because it tucks away the king into the corner safely behind these three pawns, but also allows that rook, which was in the corner, to come into the middle of the board very soon. Now remember, from the middle of the board, it has influence over the center. That's what we should be focusing on. The rook is a very strong piece, and it's a pity if a piece that is so powerful, worth 5 points, is stuck at the side. So it's really important to get it into the game. And black responds with rook here. Well, this is absolutely daft. The rook is simply doing nothing at the side of the board. Compare it with this one, which can enter the game very easily through the middle of the board. It would be much better to, for example, play pawn here to potentially allow this bishop into the game, or pawn here as well, which might allow this bishop into the game. So black has just played rook to a7. Dreadful. And white brings a knight out into the middle. Excellent. So again, bring your pieces into the game, into the centre. And black responds with rook g8. Well, this is a horror story. What a horrible rook move. It's going nowhere and doesn't help the centre at all. And white brought out a bishop here. Well, this is almost like a model position for white. The knights and bishops have entered the game. They're controlling the centre, and basically white is set up to enter the middle game very successfully. Whereas, well, black, I'm afraid, has flouted all those opening rules. So let's just go through them again. Control the centre, put your pawns in the middle, bring out your knights and bishops, and get castled as quickly as possible. Those are the three most important rules. Also, you've got to look out for threats and captures as well, but really our opponent wasn't threatening us in any way at all. So that's just the start of our adventure in the opening, but that gives us a good idea of what we should be aiming for.
We are now going to have a look at the opening laws in practice. This is our first example, and it's white to move. What should we play? The options here that we're going to look at are bishop b3, bishop g5, and castling. So let's take bishop b3 first. This is a bad move. It breaks the opening principles. The bishop was on a perfectly good square on c4. There was no reason to move that bishop again. Do not move pieces more than once in the opening unless you are capturing your opponent's pieces or you are avoiding capture. So bishop b3 is not a good move. Let's next take castling, which is a good move. It gets the king safe. Nothing wrong with castling. But the best move, and if you're a good player, you should be looking for the best move, is bishop g5, developing a minor piece and pinning black's knight against the queen. So by that, I mean the knight cannot move because white will take black's queen. And then next we can castle and move the knight to c3 and try and increase the pressure on the pinned piece. Okay, so we're going to move on to another example now. Here we're going to choose between knight b3 or bishop d3. Now, if you've been listening, bishop b3 is not a good move. We'll be once again breaking those fundamental opening principles. We're moving a minor piece more than once in the opening for no reason. So what we need to do is develop our final minor piece by playing bishop d3. And this is a very useful square later on in the game. Remember, in chess, you need to think ahead. And we're attacking this square, which could be important later on. And next we'll castle, and white's played a very, very good opening. Okay, next example. White to play. This time, we're choosing between two moves with this bishop. Do we want to move to e3, or do we want to move to g5? So let's take e3 first. It does develop a minor piece. However, the other bishop is not happy because it's not going to be able to get into the game very easily. Okay, we can move a pawn here and get it out this way, but the bishop prefers to be active probably on d3. And it also stops white's chances of controlling the centre with the e-pawn. So we're going to move the bishop to g5. Now this is a very good move because we're also creating a pin, like I spoke about earlier in the other example. And next we can move the pawn to either e3 or d3, and the bishop can come into the game in a very nice way. So if we can find these pins, they're very useful in the opening to create pressure on our opponent. But the bishop moving to e3 is not a good move because it blocks in white's pieces and it doesn't really do much on that square. Pieces like to be active in the opening.